All right, everybody have a seat. We're going to get started with today's track. My name is Pamela Dingle, if you haven't met me. I am the moderator for today, so I will be running a microphone around. This session will be recorded, so it is important that you use the mic so that the people who watch on YouTube or wherever they watch from later can actually understand the context of the question. So Jean-Francois, I'll ask you if a question is asked without the mic, just make sure you repeat it.
Yep, sure.
That's okay.
No problem.
All right, let me do an introduction of Jean-Francois. So Jean-Francois has 13 years of experience in identity, access authentication, and the information protection space. Curiosity, passion, and sharing are the three qualities he promotes in every digital identity community and product. Sometimes as advisor, architect, or lead integrator, he truly recognizes the value and strength of respecting standards and of contributing to a trust framework, and of incorporating ethics in every B2E, B2B, and B2C project that he's involved in. So I will hand it over to you, Jean-Francois.
Thank you, Pam.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I hope that your meal was good and that you will not be in some kind of sugar rush for the time being on. So I will try to help you navigate into the NIST SP-800-63-3 framework. So if I should put a picture which represents best this framework is this, a boat in smoky waters, and we will try to find a way to be sure that we can comprehend all the specificities of this framework. So as Pam introduced me, I'm part of many identity and access management communities, and the work that I'm presenting to you today is brought to you because someone asked a very good question into the IDPro community, and we have worked a lot on this question, and this was part of the newsletter from November 2018. So if you want to raise good questions and to want to have good feedback, please join IDPro. First of all, just to be sure that this is recorded, everything that I present to you does not represent any past or present employer state of mind regarding the result of this research. So we are talking about trust because the NIST framework is all about trust. And trust is exactly ensuring that one ships what one other expects him to ship. And usually to do that, we rely effectively on standards and framework. And you will find this one funny because this is an April Fool joke from the RFC committee that try to implement new terminology and how to describe requirements into standards, like must, but we know you won't, or things like that, which can bring some kind of fuzzy way to read the RFCs and the standards. And as I said, as part of IDPro, sometimes when we are not really sure on how we can use or we can comprehend a specific framework, what we will do is that we will ask peers for guidance into navigating those smoky waters. Because in the end, what we want is not to feel alone on a desperate sea without any waves. So IDPro, we got the question. The question were pretty basic, like, what is the strength of a passport? What is the strength of iris recognition and authentication system? What is the strength of a specific token I'm using to access application? In our case, we were looking at the NIST framework. And as you know, the NIST framework, the version 3 of it, is an extension of the version 2, obviously, which tend to decompose the level of assurance of the framework into three specific aspects. The first one is the identity assurance level that we call for short IAL. There is the one that concerns the authentication, so the AAL, and there is one that concerns the way that we transport those identities, which is the FAL for Federation Assurance Level. So what we try to convey here is we try to assess the strength of proof, the strength of control, and the strength of conveyance of those identity elements. And effectively, the framework describes for each one of those levels 3 different levels of power or into each one of those domains. Okay. I won't go into all the details of all those 3 because it will take like maybe half a day to go into that. I will concentrate on one specific element, which is the identity proofing part. So the strength of proof. And if you look, I don't know how many of you have read the IIL specification for the framework. Yeah, few hands on. So if you look at it, you will see that so the main definition revolves around identity evidence. And for identity evidence, we try to do 3 things. The first one is an ability to resolve. After that, we will try to validate. And in the end, we will try to verify. Those 3 steps are important because they bring to the identity proofing process very important point. The resolve action is here to ensure that the collection of identity evidence has been performed properly. The validate part will ensure that those identity evidence are trustful. We can rely on them in order to go on our journey onto the identity assurance level. The third part is the verification part, where we will ensure that we can link those identity evidence to a real claimant, the real person which is in front of us. And that will be the basis and the foundation of the identity assurance level. Where it starts to become a little bit more fuzzy when we go into the details. Because, first of all, you will see that there is a strong difference between the level 1 and the level 2 and 3. For the level 1, we don't expect so much more things than just you self-assert your identity evidence. But when we go to the second level, it becomes more stringent on how the verification process must be handled. But the most beautiful part is that you will agree with me that we have to resolve some superior, strong, fair, and sometimes weak identity evidence. How many of you have superior identity evidence in your pocket? Okay. For me, I don't have superior identity evidence. I have a passport, I have a driver license, I have a national ID card, a national health card, because I'm not from the US. We have that in Canada. Sometimes it's biometric, sometimes not, but I don't know how I can map those specific identity evidence to this specific framework. And that's what we will try to define in this specific session. So if we look at those different kind of identity evidence, there are 3 ways to categorize those identity evidence. The first one is to look at which capabilities the identity evidence is hosting by itself. The second way is how it has been delivered to the claimant. Was it given like free cards on the street? Or was there a specific process to ensure that when we delivered those identity evidence to the claimants, a verification process took place, and those identity evidence onboard some specific security measures in order to prevent any tamper action against the identity evidence. So through a specific combination all of this between capability to do and or on those specific requirements, you can see that we can define a gradient of strengths for those identity evidence. So now that I have said this, I can say that this is an identity assurance level of a power of 3. Yeah, it got some security features, No one else can write like my son, Bonne fête, Papa, which is Good Father Day in English. No one can know that I'm the real father of those two children. There are some biometrics from my daughter and my son. And there is a lifetime also on this card. It's valid for 1 year. We'll see what they will tell next year. So I can ensure to you that it was delivered to me in person with high confidence. But this is on my scale. This is not on a common scale that we all share and that we hope to establish trust on using the NIST framework. So in order to see clearer in all this, I propose to you to reapply a model that we used usually for the authentication. It's to define 3 families of identity evidence. You know the one for the authentication. I present to you the one for the identity proofing. The first one is identity evidence of what I am, where I was born, from which country I'm a citizen of. Sometimes it can change. I immigrated to Canada. I may become a Canadian citizen at some point. So, but these all represent what I am. It can be something of what I own, because I can have a house, which represents myself. I can have a specific bank account. I can own a specific corporation. I can have some stock trades or things like that. And the last family, it's what I use. So I can use a job. I can use a right to drive on the road, etc., etc., etc. So I think that by describing the identity evidence into those 3 families, we will hope to see clearer into all that. So if you allow me, we will start with the first one. So in the family of identity evidence of what I am, this is what I have listed so far. You may find other identity evidence that fits this specific family and these specific categories. I tried to give you some milestones, some gates, in order for you to better assess what is the identity evidence you are thinking about and how it fits in all that. The idea for you is to be able to make the identity evidence you have in mind when you think about your identity assurance process, that it fits into those categories and that you are capable of putting a tag of strength on this specific identity evidence. So what you will see in this specific cheat sheet is that we can still add some specificities on top of an identity evidence to make it stronger. So, for example, a birth certificate has been delivered to us, but does not have any address of record that can follow us through time. If we are capable of adding that to a birth certificate, we can put more strength into it. If we look at the other family of what I own, I found less strengthful identity evidence in this specific family. We know that things are improving with the digitalization of acts and even the digitalization of bank accounts. But so far, it's still a family where there is less power for you to drain identity evidence. Most of the time, what we miss in those documents is the ability to integrate within it a photography or some biometric representation of a biometric element. In the third families of what I've used, you can see that it's very specific to the domain you belong to. And depending on where you are working, you can find some very strong evidence that can help to assert your identity within the process. So for example, the PIF card, which is used for many people working in government and para-governmental services, can help us to assert very high level of identity assurance. So that's great, because from all this, we successfully went through the standards, looked at what are the different requirements for level of identity assurance. We were capable of defining what are the real-life evidence, the ones that you have in your wallet and in your pocket, based on those, against those requirements. It's great. It works in North America. And the same example that I took about this good Father Descartes, which for me represent a strong evidence, but for you represent maybe nothing. Sometimes when we want to assert those identity proofing along a North American standards, it does not mean nothing, or it means less to our counterpart in other parts of the world. So the last cheat sheet that I will present to you is a way to be able to translate the level of assurance that you have established for the North American, along the North American standards, in other standards all over the world. So for example, you are now capable of talking to an Australian, an Aussie guy, and tell him that your way of pondering a specific identity assurance process against his own way of seeing things. And you are capable of reaching a state where you are in accordance. You can talk the same language. And we come back to my first slide. We are capable of establishing trust, because now if you ship something which is of identity assurance level 2 to someone who expects something of the level moderate, you are talking about the same thing and the same language. But even if we talk the same language, we still have to convey the same thing. We should ensure that the way that we propagate this information from A to B keeps the integrity of it. So another thing that I propose here is to use the vector of trust standards that exist and that define for each one of those identity proofing, credential usage, credential management, and assertion presentation to standardize the way that you represent your level by adding a reference that will represent the framework from which you are establishing this level. So from now, if I say that I have an identity assurance level of strength 2, coming from N633, which might represent the NIST SP-800-63-3, I'm capable, through the claims that I'm sending to a third party, capable of giving to him all the keys necessary to comprehend what is the real strength of the identity assurance process that took part on the other side of the ocean. So I hope that now this is clearer for you, that you have a better understanding on how you can assess your real-life evidence with this framework, and that you are capable of propagating those elements to your counterpart with whom you hope to build trust. And if you have any question? Yeah.
Are there any guidelines on the life cycle of the assertion? Like if I assert a driver's license today and determine a certain IAL, are there any guidelines on, hey, you should check again in a year, or people move, people change names, and so forth? Like, what is the position on the lifetime?
So, good question. I didn't want too much into this, but if we go back here, you can see that some evidence must be asserted along a specific process. So, for example, here, if I want, I can use. Sorry for that. I can use a strong identity evidence, but I can use it only if it was asserted against a process where the validate and the verify is of level 2. So it means that effectively it has been follow up through times that the identity evidence has been renewed frequently and checked frequently. There is not so much of the details into the standards as far as I know.
Thank you, Jean-Francois, for your presentation. A question for you in terms of IAL 1, 2, and 3, specifically under the background that 800-63-3 was published, I think, 2 years ago.
Yeah, it's 2 years ago.
And as we all know, technology moves on, and there are new ways of being able to take in IAL-type information. One of that happens to be behavioral biometrics. And from my reading of that section, I really don't see much in there in terms of technology pieces, but at the same time, it's something that has been well adopted in many financial institutions. Do you think that maybe there's some opportunity for maybe some updating, revisions, or do you see that as technology it sets?
Good question again. It's true that for any frameworks, there is a life cycle to maintain beyond that. But first of all, we must applaud people who switch from level of assurance with watch very constraining to something which is broader and allow us to match more use cases, because now we don't have only one line, we have a matrix of use cases that we can fit. But my best answer to that, and there are a lot of discussion on this specific element. If you look at vector of trust is not on 3 domains, it's on 4 domains. And there are a lot of discussion on how to split the authentication assurance level into something that represents more the credential usage and the way the credentials are deployed, the authenticator are given to the claimant. And now coming back to your point, for sure there are a technological change, but so far we didn't see any change into those specific families of authenticator. Even if you do it, even if it's a biometric continuous authentication, it still fits into the family of authenticator we described. And the standards does not want to stick to a specific kind of technology. It wants to talk about family so that we can cover the new solutions that are coming in. Does that answer your question?
It does. Perhaps we'll talk more.
Yeah, okay.
We're at the end of our time anyway. Is there more time on that counter?
It's 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Then we have time for one more question. Anyone? Okay, then in that case, we'll give you some time back. Jean-Francois, I'm sure, will answer questions up front. And we start again at 2:05. Thank you. Thanks, Jean-Francois.